Hey guys, CM back again. Second video in the last few days. I know I'm actually making videos for once. So before I go further into this video, I just want to do a quick shout out to Agent Jedi / Mark GFL for the shout out in his video the other day. Much appreciated, and I know a lot of people have actually come over to my channel and had a look at the video, and even quite a few have dropped subscription, which I really appreciate, guys. I really means a lot to me. Today's video, I'm going to be looking at 268 version 4. Now, this is kind of like a follow-up to the video that SirFoch did earlier, where he basically has a wee rant about this tank, and I am completely with him on this. So if you want to check Foch's video out, I'll put a link down below, and you'll see what he means by calling this the Bobject, which basically the way he's describing it with that name is that any random pleb in World of Tanks, even 46, even your really bad players, the people who are really not good at the game, can take this tank and pull out a good result in it without too much problem at all. He actually also shows you one of the statistics from VB Addict, which collects, all the data across the servers, and this is top on win rate out of all the tier 10s, I think across pretty much every tank in the game. This is the best average win rate, which is 57.25. And when you've got so many people doing so well with a tank, you start to think that maybe there's something wrong with it. And there is. Now, Foch doesn't really go into the armor too much or anything on his video, but if you want to see what why this tank is so dumb, is that just watch his video as well. His video will show a match where he's literally just on autopilot. He's not putting any thought into it at all, because he doesn't need to. He's in a Bobject. So I'm going to start off with the armor. So I'm just going to switch to and from the live and the collision there. So then I'm going to start off with the superstructure, which you may be already starting to see why this is ridiculous. That's over 310 effective, over 320 in some places, and that's if you're in a Bobject versus Bobject flat ground fight, which is almost never gonna happen. If it's angled slightly, it does get a tiny bit better on this side, not so much this side. This side roughly stays the same, and this side does get quite a bit better. If it's angled back, let's say it's using all of its 5 degrees of gun depression. Yeah, over 340, 350, which versus pretty much every tank it meets, apart from maybe other tier 10 TDs, they're not gonna pen it, not even with premium. And tier 10 TDs will need premium to pen the superstructure. I'm gonna ignore the actual hull for the moment, and I'm gonna move on to what's supposed to be the weak spot, or one of the two weak spots frontally. It's this rangefinder cupola thing. Yeah, it's 250 frontal. There are a lot of tanks that don't, even at tier 10, that on AP do not have 250mm of pen, let alone enough to go through the effective armor. And this is before you take into account that AP and APCR lose penetration at distance. So, for example, the standard German 128mm gun that you find on tanks like the E75, the Mouse, it's available on the E100 as well, and you can get it on the VK4502B, and of course the ever popular Rheinmetall Scorpion. Yeah, they're gonna really struggle with that. And then when you take into account that AP loses and APCR lose penetration over distance, tanks like the T-10, Russian Tier 9 heavy, and in fact all the Russian Tier 9 heavies, will not be able to pen it. At all. Unless they high roll like crazy. And that's if they hit it at all, because it's tiny. And that's also only if they hit the flattest part, because it's, of course, rounded in many places. And that's also bearing in mind if they don't hit these two spaced parts at either side, they have to hit the most central part of it as well. Yeah. There is another cupola here, but it's 250 frontal, and it's even smaller. If you look at that, it's the same on both sides. It's like, what's the point of them even being there? Then your next weak spot, I'm moving on to the hull now. Next weak spot is this lower plate, which is tiny. Look at that. So if I go into the visual model so I can show you where it is, it's this tiny ass part here. So if I zoom in a bit, you can see like the upper plate here, the lower plate here, and then the lower plate here. That is tiny. That can be really easily hidden. So it's not a weak spot. And then it's still, at many angles, like, it's an auto ricochet at many angles. Look at that. If you're in a Bobject versus Bobject fight, and one of you is firing AP, you won't be able to pen it. You'd have to load heat to pen that. But then there'd be no point shooting that anyway, because your heat would go through this part, which is bigger, but has the same problem. It's weaker than this part, and I'll go into this in a second. I'll go back to the collision model. So, upper plate, lower plate, lower plate. The lower plate being a weak spot. It's hard, you can't really get a shot on it in most situations unless you're in something like a city fight, where, you know, you're often on flat ground, so maps like Ensk or Himmelsdorf, you're not really going to get much of a shot on it otherwise. And then you've got this upper plate, which basically works the exact same way. It's an auto bounce for AP and APCR at most angles that you'll get it at, unless you're above it. And this is basically a heat magnet, this part here. Any tank that has heat, that has over, let's say, like your 250 pen ones generally won't go through, like your tier 8 ones won't. But any that have over 300 millimeters of heat pen, which guess what, is most tier 9 and 10 tanks, will go through it. This is fucking stupid, because tanks shouldn't have to be firing heat at something to pen it. In general, there should be a workable weak spot, which this is not. And then there are some tanks at those tiers that don't have heat for premium ammo. For example, the Conqueror, the Super Conqueror, the Bobject 263, the tank a tier lower, on the same line as this, cannot pen this tank frontally. Apart from maybe if it like max rolls on, well, unless it like loads premium on like one of these two spots, but I'll go into that in a second. So yeah, there are a number of tanks that just won't go through this at all, even at +1, or even at same tier or -1 tiers. So yeah, and then we come on to I've only just gone on to the lower plate, which is 300 millimeters thick. Yeah, and it's angled, so it's over 340 to 350 effective. So, yeah, standard ammo from anything is just gonna bounce. That's just, yeah, just don't bother shooting this bit. Unless you're something like a Jagdpanzer firing heat. But even then, if it's like at a slight slope, or something like, or if you hit it at a weird angle, like that, for example. Like, let's say if you're aiming like here for the tracking shot, and or if you're aiming maybe to hit the upper plate with Jagdpanzer heat, so it would kind of have that weird heat pen because of heat having 80 degrees for the auto bounce angle rather than 70. Bit fucking weird, but there you go, World of Tanks. And yeah, you're still not gonna pen that at that angle, which is not the most extreme angle you could actually come into contact with this thing in. So yeah, this is basically a go fuck yourself zone, which is also the zone which is going to be seen by most tanks. If you're going over a ridge like this, guess what they're going to see? Guess what they're going to try and shoot? Most tanks will not be able to pen that. Yeah, and this is the flattest angle that anyone will ever get it at as well. And even then, they'll quite often bounce. For example, your AMX-30 and AMX-30B, your French tier 9 and 10 mediums, they cannot pen that at the worst possible angle with heat, which is their premium ammo, because they only have 300mm of pen with it. This is fucking stupid. And then you take the Object 257, the tier 9 heavy that was introduced with 9.22 along with this tank. It cannot pen that lower plate with heat unless it gets a really ridiculously high roll with heat, which again is its premium ammo. Yeah, fucking great. And then you have the Object 705A, the tier 10 back-mounted turret Russian heavy that was introduced with the same patch that cannot pen there with heat either at the flattest angle, unless it also gets a max roll or high roll. Yeah, it's fucking stupid. Then let's move on to the side. So the side, obviously, it's pennable. It's definitely not super ridiculously strong on this part, or even this part, but you know, hitting those, and also spaced armor, which is gonna troll anyone who's got heat loaded specifically for this tank. Yeah, it's quite often gonna hit the tracks. Also, the fact that, you know, you see how much space there is under the tracks. People are often gonna think that the hull extends this far down. Obviously, it doesn't on the visual model either, but when you're aiming for this side, quite often you'll have some of your reticle. Guess what? Some of your reticle is going to be where these road wheels are. So they're going to eat quite a few shots as well. This tank, at least, you can track and pen it with the same shot, unlike, you know, the 257. But people aren't always going to be going for that. Let's switch back to the collision model again. It does have a weak part here, but I've heard quite a few people have actually had trouble penning this part as well, even flat, which suggests it's kind of bugged, but I don't think that's the case. I think they're just getting rather unlucky with the angle most of the time, like catching it this sort of angle, which is an auto bounce, so that's what it sounds like to me. Then I've also had people bounce off, well, I've also seen people bounce off of this part with premium ammo when at this angle you can see it's like 250 effective. Yeah, I don't know either. Obviously you can shoot here, but you know, it's dodgy as fuck. And then of course you would think that maybe it would have an engine deck that you could overmatch. No, it's 55mm. So there's only a couple of tanks in the game that can actually overmatch it. The Jagdpanzer E100, the FV215B183 and the FV4005, and I think Conway, actually no, the Conway can't because that large derp gun on that thing is like 160. So yeah, there's only 3 tanks that can overmatch it. Great. And that's before we even get onto the gun, by the way. But I'm gonna show you like why this is a dumb tank compared to the tank before, which the 263 has not had its armor changed from when it was tier 10. So we're looking at the 268 version 4, and there are no real practical frontal weak spots at all. So let's switch to the 263. So as you can see, like, the armor on this is, you know, it's really fucking strong frontally. Obviously, there's a tiny ass weak spot there for some tanks to exploit. Then tanks can overmatch the engine deck because it's only 30mm, so, you know, anything 91mm in caliber or higher can do that. And it has a lower plate that can be penned by tier 7s. This is good. This means that lower tier tanks, if they have to exploit it, have a frontal weak spot that can pen, albeit a lot do need APC, well, premium ammo to do it. But they can at least pen it. This is not the case with the 268 version 4. Because a lot of tanks, when they catch this lower plate at this lower plate, at most angles they engage it, it will be an auto bounce for them. Because most tanks that are tier 8 do not have heat as premium, they have APCR. And a lot of tanks at tier 9 and 10 do as well. Such as the American tier 10 tank destroyers. Yeah, they cannot pen that. They cannot pen that with premium ammo at these angles. They might be able to pen here if they hit it, but at a lot of ranges, the reticle is gonna be quite full of here and here and here, where they're not gonna pen. So, yeah. And also the side armor is, you know, far more, you know, far easier to exploit. Also, it's far weaker where you can track it. And even the rear is, you know, similarly, well, the rear and the Bobject is fairly weak as well, but, you know, yeah, they had to give it something that tanks can pen reliably, right? But yeah. And you might be thinking, surely there's got to be something to balance this. Well, if we look at the stats, you might think, oh, it's got 0.4 dispersion. That's actually not great versus other tier 10 TDs. And even some of the heavy tanks and the medium tanks. But look at the soft stats. Look at the aim time. Yeah, it's not an inaccurate gun. It's really not. And you take into account that since this thing cannot run vertical stabilizers, you're generally going to be finding people running vents, rammer, and optics instead. This then buffs the gun handling as well. And generally they'll have brothers in arms. They'll generally have smooth ride. They'll generally have snapshot. Which, again, these all buff the gun handling, albeit not by much for when the tank's moving or turning the hull. And quite a lot of people run food as well. You can see where this is starting to go, can't you? So let's just take all these off again. So we've just found that the gun is actually not bad. It's not that inaccurate. And if you want to actually see proof of this, go and watch Wash's video as well. He actually gets some ridiculous fucking shots. And it aims in so ridiculously quick. In fact, he's sniping at a decent range versus a E4 lower plate at one point. And the E4 is just not able to pen him at all. Whereas he's just, you know, making him like butter, really. And you might think, oh, it must have low pen. Nope. It has similar AP pen to the Jagdpanzer E100. It has 360 heat pen as well. So it's definitely got pen. Then you might think, oh, it's 650 alpha instead of 750. This doesn't matter. Because you don't have to worry about trading, because things are just going to bounce off you. And you might think, oh, it must be slow as shit. Nope, 55 kilometers an hour top speed and 22 in reverse. It's almost as fast as the T110E3, the closest comparison in general in terms of armor and gun. It's fast. It's almost as fast as the T110E3 is going forward, but reverse. It has 20 power to weight, so it can get up to its top speeds really fucking quickly. And you might think, oh, it turns slowly. It kinda does, but not so slowly that it's easy to really exploit. In most situations, you would really have to catch it in the open on a map like, you know, Prokhorovka to actually have any proper chance of circling it, and you'd have to be able to track it consistently. And that's, you know, providing that they don't have clutch braking, which does quite heftily buff the traverse rate on this tank, actually. So there's that as well. And then you might think, oh, it must have no health. Nope, it's got a decent hit point pool, actually. Fairly comparable to some, you know, same tier heavies. Then you might think it must have no view range. Nope, 370 base. Which, sure, it's not great for tier 10, but it's more than enough for how you play this tank. Because generally you're playing this balls to the wall aggressive, so it doesn't really matter. You're gonna spot things just by being relatively close to them. Literally the only real downside in any way is the lack of, well, I say lack of gun depression. It's 5 degrees, so it's still workable in most situations. And the way that it's laid out just means that you can work with it fairly easily. And then you still get a decent gun traverse as well, 12 degrees to either side. And guess what? Since you've got a 152mm gun, you can overmatch quite a few things that have 50mm of armor. And trust me, there are still a few of those at tier 10. And really the only true negative aspect of this tank is the shell velocity. It's 960. But even then, that's fairly workable. And it's the same shell velocity across all its shells. So that means if you're, that's actually pretty good for the anyone who's learned how to, you know, track tanks at range with this thing, so they know how much lead to roughly give a tank in order to hit it. Which means that if they want to load, for example, an HE shell for, let's say, a light tank like a Rheinmetall Panzerwagen, then you should be able, then this person who has learned how to hit these things, or hit at range with this shell velocity, should just be able to switch ammo and then easy peasy get a nice little hit on a Rheinmetall Panzerwagen for, you know, 840. Sure, it's like low HE alpha compared to some others, but it's still, you know, enough to cause tanks to be worried about it. So, like I say, if you want to see just how ridiculous this tank is in game, go and watch Foch's video. Like I say, I'll link it down below. And I'm going to leave it there. I'll probably make another video when I can on some other things, or whenever anything comes up, and if I have the time. But for now, guys, that's all from me. Catch you next time.